Good morning, good morning. Welcome to the first session of day 3 of HAS, day 2 of HAS. Today we are diving into the role of FRMs. I know here at the Healthcare Advocate Summit we have a lot of roles, responsibilities among the patient access paradigm or the field as a whole. And today we want to discuss, as with anything else you're learning here at Healthcare Advocate Summit, what resources are available to you, including FRMs or field reimbursement managers. Some of you may be FRMs, some of you may interact with FRMs often, and some may have no clue who an FRM is and how they are a resource to you. Hopefully by the end of today's session, this morning's session, we will be able to answer any questions you have on how to best utilize an FRM. And if you are an FRM, those tips and tricks that you can dive into and how you can best interact and discuss with your stakeholders, with your clients for patient access. Now, by means of introduction, my name is Kiana Dixon. I am a pharmacist by background and by training. I'm currently the Associate Director of Educational Programs at the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs. Here at HAS, we're most known for our PACS program, that's the Prior Authorization Certified Specialist program, and those who enroll into that program are usually FRMs, field reimbursement managers, as well as those who are in direct patient care. So we're at the front lines of educating and being a resource to those in patient access, and that's why we wanted to have this discussion with Heather on how FRMs are a resource as well to you. Thank you, Heather.
Good morning. My name is Heather Polk. I am the U.S. Director of Field Reimbursement with Ascendus Pharma. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Ascendus, Ascendus is a small, rare disease organization focused in the endocrinology space.
Thank you, Heather. Now, again, today we will discuss Heather's role. She will explain who FRMs, field reimbursement managers, are. We will dive into a little more depth of who they interact with, the different stakeholders and different clients which they interact with, as well as tips and tricks for either you who are in patient access at that direct patient or direct provider level of care, or if you are in a manufacturer as a field reimbursement manager. Again, so let's go ahead and get us started. Heather, can you tell us and dive into who is a field reimbursement manager?
So a field reimbursement manager. A field reimbursement manager is a representative of a manufacturer who has a product that is accessible through buy and bill, specialty pharmacy, and usually requires a prior authorization for a patient to gain access to. There's usually defined utilization management criteria by the payer or the PBM. It's usually a very expensive therapy and so somewhat controlled access. Our role and responsibility really focuses on driving that case or that prescription to a final determination, helping you uncover or overcome any hurdles. So a denial, a necessary appeal, a peer review if necessary. We do also help prevent dormancy, so cases from going dormant, staying actively engaged with the HCP and or their staff to ensure that they're making timely submissions into the payer, again, so that the identified patient can gain access. So we educate on what the policy is, how does the patient gain access. We educate on resources available that we provide or that the manufacturer provides. So sometimes there's a little bit of a silo, if you will, in our manufacturing organizations where you'll have field reimbursement who's sometimes more aligned with market access, and then you have a hub. We do collaborate, but we can appear sometimes as separate functions. So we do like to educate on what the journey of the script is when you directly submit into the hub. And of course, we create awareness of financial support that we provide directly or may have knowledge of that your patients can take advantage of.
So a few of those main points that Heather mentioned are the responsibilities of a field reimbursement manager, or what you see here on the screen. We have that they are the bridge or the educators between the pharmaceutical manufacturer to the HCPs. They're their experts in the reimbursement process. So when you have a question about a particular product for that manufacturer, they're really your go-to resource. Their support for the patient access team to therapies and medications for the patient, of course. And as she mentioned, she collaborates with various stakeholders among the prior authorization or reimbursement process. And that's what we want to focus on today. We will dive into each stakeholder or each client interaction that Heather interacts with or other field reimbursement managers interact with the most. We'll go into how she interacts with these patients or these patient access teams and how to best communicate with an FRM if you are in one of those teams. So first up, we have pharmaceutical companies. Here, I'm interested, Heather, in how you interact internally as an expert in reimbursement and the process for that for your products or your therapeutic area to your internal colleagues.
Sure. So internally, we collaborate with multiple functions, primarily sales and market access. So with regard to market access team, they're the ones who are out negotiating with the payers and the PBMs. What we do is we often confirm that the criteria that they have negotiated is actually being realized by the HCPs, the staff, and that there is no contradiction or there's not unexpected friction in the process. So we identify trends and we share them based on feedback. And this is really important because as much as we are out to educate you guys on what the criteria is, we're also being educated by you all about what your experience is, especially if you are not directly submitting into the hub. If you're making PAs. So like if you use an app like SureScript or a service like Cover My Meds and you're submitting directly into there, the process can sometimes feel a little different than submitting into the hub. We don't have access necessarily to see what you have submitted electronically, so we rely on a lot of feedback, so that's very important in the process. And it's not wrong. I think manufacturers often try to influence, hey, submit to the hub, we can more directly support. An FRM can still be of support whether you submit electronically or you submit into our hubs. We are not here to tell you which pathway is the right one. We do want to learn about your process, so I think that is really, really critical. Your FRM should be seeking to understand what is your process, how do you use the hub, how do you use electronic submission processes, and what resources do we have available to make those processes as frictionless as possible. So we have a level of expertise, and it shouldn't be something like, oh, here's an enrollment form. FRM should be going deeper to help you understand what's the key information that needs to be submitted on that enrollment form. Nuances, who are your top payers? So if you have Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial, probe and understanding what's your experience with those payers, what's your pain point with those, how can I, especially with my specific therapy, right? How can I help you better understand how to overcome some of those pain points? With your commercial plans, all commercial plans are not the same. It can kind of feel a little more symbiotic with Medicaid. It is what it is. Maybe there's a little nuance with various managed Medicaid plans in your states, but it's more fluid. But there can be so much more friction when you're dealing with various commercial plans. So I think a great FRM helps you prioritize what cases you should work first, so that you're working on the lowest hanging fruit, if you will. You're working on your easiest cases, and then you triage your more challenging cases where you may need to submit a letter of medical necessity. You anticipate potentially doing an appeal. A lot of times HCPs don't make the submissions, their staff do, and you all may be the staff in the office that are helping support, so you have to put certain cases to the side because you need a more collaborative submission process where HCP has to provide you more detailed information. But sharing those details with us helps us understand what resource to pull out of our bag to offer up as a benefit to you and that patient that you're trying to get onto therapy.
What I'm hearing the most when you were discussing your interactions with HCPs is that for HCPs and their staff and the providers level, you're attempting to meet them where they are. But first you have to lay that foundation of where they are. And you take those insights from them back to your internal organization, yes, for strategy?
Absolutely, especially the sales reps. So sales reps are often interacting with offices more frequently than we are. So offices sometimes convey information and insights. So it may be that the sales rep is going to see an office prior to me getting there. I may empower them with the information to relay to the HCP or the staff. That's one way in which we collaborate. There's a lot of collaboration between FRMs and sales, but you may have clinical nurse educators or some sort of clinical staff that's also supporting the HCP who's written the script. We do with regard to our process because we have an auto injector that the HCP either trains their patient on using or the clinical nurse educator will train the caregiver and the patient directly. So sometimes there is some communication just on staff norms. Do they need a training? Maybe what a caregiver or a patient have experienced, but there's a lot of symbiotic communication between our internal partners. Occasionally MSLs and market access, again, we're reiterating what our trends we're seeing with regard to outcomes with specific payers.
So I know on the providers level, you have a lot of contacts for a particular manufacturer. Like she mentioned, you have an FRM, a clinical educator, a sales rep, sometimes an MSL that you're interacting with for this one organization. While you may not interact with all of them, if a manufacturer organization has that symbiotic relationship, if you reach out to one somewhere along your process, because they have that collaboration, hopefully they're able to put you in contact with who you have, the most relatable questions to. Hopefully in the reimbursement process, that is an FRM so that you have those appropriate resources for you. Now, just to dive in a little bit more next here for HCPs and their staff, I'm really interested in how you interact with them, especially within the IDN specialty pharmacies. I've seen a lot of those here at HAS so far.
Sure. So again, I cannot reiterate understanding what is their process. I really encourage my team before you go in and kind of data dump or say, hey, here I am and I have this for you, understand what are their realities. You may be talking with one individual, so identify additional partners in the office. Is there an opportunity to get everyone together, or how can you follow up with each individual appropriately? But really understand what their process is, what their experience is with FRMs, what their expectations are from FRMs, and the additional support services that the FRM can educate or create an awareness that exists that would support them and their patient. The enrollment process is really important. Again, most organizations are going to give you some sort of understanding of what to expect if you do make an electronic submission. We most definitely will be supporting your understanding and knowledge of any enrollment forms that we have, what is absolute necessary information to be submitted on that enrollment form. And I can't stress that enough, because if you've seen one enrollment form, you've literally seen one enrollment form. And so I do think orientating yourself with the FRM, get a highlighter and a pen, circle, have that as your little cheat sheet, whatever folder they may provide, archive that information. Perhaps you may have a backup staff member that's not there. They have a source of reference if they have to make a submission on behalf of a HCP in the office. But creating that understanding of the enrollment process and how to make a clean submission reduces the friction in the process. We do provide ongoing support, so we have portals that we work in. We're looking, are there any updates? Has there been communication, with our hub and the caregiver or the patient? How does that information is there any information that is relevant that we may need to relay to you? Because what can happen is and when I say we, the FRM, if they're empowered to engage with caregivers or patients, or our hub partners, so the case managers may be engaging with patients, and there may be conversations going on that you're not aware of. And so I think a good FRM is going to create awareness of how cases are moving along, not just, oh, did it get approved? Oh, I saw you got a denial. How can I help you? We're creating full awareness of the entire journey, if you will. And then lastly, we're really policy experts. But you're going to check us on the policy experts, because what we know today may be different tomorrow. And so I love, I think her name was Lacey. She said, well, a relationship enables me to disagree with my field reimbursement. Have a relationship where you both feel comfortable disagreeing or just having hard conversations. This is not an exact science. And what we are trained on, what I train my team on, can often change, and you may be the entity to first encounter that change that we're not aware of. Unfortunately, payers like to play these games where they're not always forthcoming. They make a change in policy, and we're not aware of that until, unfortunately, again, you guys experience that. So it's a proactive and reactive conversation. It's a proactive and reactive relationship that we're really seeking to have, where we're informing one another, and we have trust, integrity. We're transparent in our communications, because our goal is to support the patients that you guys have appropriately identified.
Now, Heather, as we continue with the HCPs, I wanted to clarify, or at least get a little bit more insight, when you meant the proactive versus reactive interactions with the staff at a provider level. Are you reaching out to them proactively, or is it opposite, to where the provider's office is reaching out to the FRM for more resources?
Great question, and there's going to be a lot of variability based on the manufacturer's rules of engagement that they have defined for each of their FRMs or access managers. So my organization, initially when I joined, we were 100% reactive, meaning we could not go out and create awareness of field reimbursement support or our hub until a case was submitted into our hub. Not really ideal for a physician who might be interested but wants to understand, well, do you have access on this plan? And I am in a market where it is very market access sensitive. So if it's not on plan, they want to, okay, I'll just pick a competitor. But if you're really preferring my brand, then I want to have a conversation with you. And I want to learn about the patient that you have identified so that I can help you understand, well, here is how we could potentially overcome what looks like an inaccessible plan. And then I want to understand, why have you made a preference for my therapy over what the plan has preferred? And that may be an advantage that we can overcome through a really great letter of medical necessity and a submission of a formulary exception. So what looks like a no might not truly be a no, and that's one way in which we can be proactive. How do you find us if you don't know who we are, especially when you're launching new drugs? There are some manufacturers, you can go to their websites. If you have your salesperson's information, you can reach out to them if a FRM or access manager has not yet been in to your office. If you have a relationship with a medical science liaison, they often know how to tap into the field reimbursement team. And then lastly, the brand's website, there's a tab where you confirm that you're a healthcare practitioner, and then they usually create an awareness of the hub. You can always call into the hub number. There's variability on whether or not you can do a search for Find My Rep, Find My FRM, Find My MSL. Unfortunately, our organization, we don't have that functionality yet, but it is growing to be very common. So your existing contacts, the website, or dialing into the hub will usually help you identify who your field reimbursement is and begin to build that relationship that is proactive and reactive.
So on the HCP side, we've heard often how they're handling and managing multiple loads of cases, not only in your therapeutic area for your product, but multiple other therapeutic areas as well. On your side, from the perspective of the FRM, how many would you say on average cases do you usually have in a week's time?
Great question. So that's going to vary. I'm in the rare disease space, so some geographies, and they're not, ironically, always going to be your population centers, meaning New York, LA, Chicago, Texas. They're not always driving your volume. You may have passionate key opinion leaders or supporters of your product that are in other states. So really, you're going where you have demand, and that can vary in rare disease. But when you have a drug like, I don't know, so HIV space is a area that I was in. You can sometimes have hundreds of scripts that come in a week. For us, we might only have 50 to 100 across the nation that come in for a week. So in some geographies you could have, or some therapeutic areas, you could have hundreds of scripts coming in per day. You could not ever reach 100 per week in some organizations. So it's going to vary based on the therapeutic area that you're in and the prevalence of the disease.
Now, moving forward to the next stakeholder interaction, we have specialty pharmacies. And how do your interactions between specialty pharmacies or your engagement with them vary with those interactions at the direct provider level?
It's going to sound like a broken record, but it's going to vary significantly based on the rules of engagement. And I think the specialty pharmacy is one that's a little trickier. And specialty pharmacy not associated with the IDN. IDN specialty pharmacies, I feel like FRMs are much more entrenched and have a closer relationship than they would with a Walgreens community pharmacy or a CVS, or if you're in the rare disease space like a Orsini, Panther, Amber, et cetera. And that is because the nature of those services that they provide, they're a little more robust, sometimes duplicative. They can do PEAs, they do appeals, et cetera. And those relationships with SPs are managed by your trade staff within your organization. But the two common ways in which FRMs are usually tapped on the shoulder to engage by the SP, can't get a call back from a patient, not making the right contact in an office. They will reach out, sometimes through a report. Can you reach out to this office? Can you get them to reach out to their patient to give us a call? And normally that's a call that, I don't know this number, click, deny. So a good FRM will inform you all of what number to maybe encourage the patient to anticipate dialing from, and please accept that call. Or we learn what that number is and then inform you after the process when they can't. But I would say they're somewhat still defining how we're going to support SPs, but patients, caregivers, HCPs lost in the mix being non-responsive. And in some organizations, you may be also, you see a refill didn't come through. You may reach out to the HCP, especially if it's a critical medicine, to inform them that their patient didn't refill, and they may want to tap back into that patient. So those are some of the ways in which we can provide assistance.
Now, Heather, she's gone through multiple stakeholders from which FRMs engage and interact, build relationships the most. And she's given a few nuggets of advice of how to best interact with those FRMs so that you have the best outcomes when it comes to research, resources, as well as information for your patients. And now I want to dive into a more in-depth conversation of those tips and tricks for communication best practices to uphold that engagement, to better those relationships between you and the FRM. So we'll go over the communication best practices, whether you are at a provider level on how to best engage with FRMs, or if you are an FRM on those communication best practices for when you are reaching out or you're communicating to providers and their staff. So first we have how HCPs and their staff can best interact with FRMs. And when Heather and we were discussing this conversation of what information we wanted to include and discuss at HAS, it was very in-depth, and it was kind of hard to identify which pieces we wanted to include specifically because there's so much, right? Providers, they're all very different, as well as FRMs, they're very different. These are the best practices that you should employ for any FRM, whether they are good or not as great, as involved as others may be. Now, on the left in the white, we have how to contact your FRM if you ever have those questions. Heather, from your perspective, what information from the HCPs is best used by you in your first interaction with them?
What? Say that again, please.
What information from the HCPs and their staff is needed the most from you in order to interact with them best?
Sure. So everything that you see on the pink there, just if you have a skeletal portion of that information. Obviously, if you're in a multi-practice, which physician has written the script, the patient name. If you've submitted into the hub, there's usually a patient ID that is identified, or a case number. Either of those will usually help the FRM identify the case. If you can confirm who the insurer is, the PBM. If you have any approval or denial information that may not have been submitted into the hub, if you have that handy, and you can use that to talk to. If the information has been submitted, a FRM is usually going to be in front of their device, their portal. You all may also be communicating through a portal as well and uploading information on your own. A lot of hubs still have it where you either fax in the information or you directly upload into a portal that's used. I know some offices don't like portals. They just prefer to fax in and will upload the information. But any of that information in the pink that you see on the screen is going to be very helpful for an FRM to really support you. And I would say at a minimum, if you can get that patient ID or that case number, we can kind of track it down even if you don't have the physician name or even the patient name.
Now, from the FRM side, how could you optimize, for the FRMs that are here, optimize communication when they are communicating and building relationships with HCPs and their staff?
Sure. So if the HCP or staff has reached out to you, respond as promptly as possible. And so I really think when you are introducing yourselves, make them aware of how large your geography may be. So my team, we have really large geographies. Let them know what your expected response time might be to them reaching out to you, so then you set the norm. So if they have a different norm with another FRM, they understand what your norm is for your cases that you're supporting them on. That is usually really helpful. My team is usually responsive within, I would say, minutes to any time during that working day. But now my team is going to have 2 products, 2 different call points. And so we're setting the expectation that we will try to respond within 12 to 24 hours. Or I've set that expectation. They don't necessarily have to be, proactive with that communication, but I am trying to help them think about what's their workload, and then the workload varies for each FRM. So I really encourage FRMs who are here and you're listening, as your responsibilities shift and norms that your HCPs and their staff have had with you, be proactive in sharing, hey, this has changed. I just wanted to inform you this. I'm still going to be your FRM. If you are not able to reach me, here's another mode of communication. If you're open to texting, we haven't traditionally text. I'm super responsive to text. I'm going to be traveling more. But just being proactive and informing them is really helpful and usually very much appreciated.
Now, we've discussed the different interactions, the different clients or stakeholders that you do interact with. We've gone over the communication best practices. Of all these bits of information that we've covered, in your case, what would you say is the ideal interaction? From those who you speak to, who stands out the most for a very successful outcome for your patients?
I love that question. So to me, what I hear Kiana asking is, who's a rock star FRM? A rock star FRM is one who is, gotten to understand what each unique needs are of the office. If there are multiple stakeholders in that office, what do each of them need? And you literally have to map that out for each office. No FRM should presume, it's not cookie cutter. You have to prescribe the needs or tailor your how you're going to support them based on what they need. That's really critical. Own your, my motto with my team is own your impact. Impact is an acronym. Influence everything that you can control. The number one way you're going to influence what you can control is be the expert that whoever you're going to see in that office is expecting you to be. Review policy report or other resources that we have on changes with regard to utilization management criteria. Review the cases that you need to discuss with that office. Know top of mind, and you help drive the conversation from an efficiency standpoint. If you come in kind of knowing what to anticipate, what their norms are, what they're expecting from you, it's going to be helpful. Because if the staff is giving you their time, they value you. So you have already created an understanding that you're a high quality individual who they want to spend time with. Don't take that for granted. A lot of FRMs have been former sales reps. And in sales world, you can kind of get into that rat race of, I want more, a high number of interactions. I really encourage my team, focus on having the highest quality interaction, and then you will be pulled on, because every time they interact with you, they find value in interacting with you. You are helping solve problems. There are some manufacturers that wrap really interesting KPIs or numbers of interactions expected around field reimbursement, and I don't think that that's how field reimbursement managers really provide value. I think through a trusted relationship where there's a lot of integrity and belief in the value of the FRM, you're going to want to regularly interact with them. The measurable success is, that's the M in impact. Are you helping that account get their patients on therapy? Are you helping them understand how to have a frictionless process? P, we are here to serve patients. We're not here to serve our sales reps. We're not here to serve the organization. We work for the organization and we represent the organization. Accountability, hold your FRMs accountable for the information and the knowledge that you need. If they cannot directly influence that, if the organization has created a resource that you don't find valuable and you have a suggestion, offer that feedback to the FRM. See how you can engage with the FRM's leadership and share those insights. Our goal and our desire from a manufacturing standpoint is to provide resources that are meaningful for you. So hold us accountable. First, that FRM, they should be delivering valuable resources and information as a reimbursement expert. And then the organization, we really want to deliver meaningful assets to you all. Compliant collaboration. Respect the rules of engagement. Our legal team has put the smack down, if you will, on what we can and cannot do. If you think that there's an opportunity for us to do something different, please share that. We're open to it. It's somewhat fixed. This is a very highly regulated space that we're in with regard to strong do's and don'ts. But you will see variability amongst the organization. Just respect what that one FRM can do and don't compare and contrast, because the rules of engagement across the industry don't necessarily align. And then the T is for trust. And so build trust. And I've had the great fortune of having a team that has built a phenomenal level of trust with their accounts. And I have had some instances where some FRMs have dropped the ball. We've had to intervene, and we've had to have some hard conversations. They've requested different FRMs. And so feel comfortable if you are not satisfied with the level of support. Professionally engaging, there's no need to berate that FRM, but seek out a manager. It could be a sales manager, it could be the FRM manager, but convey what is missing and form another trusted partner, but give the opportunity, give the manufacturer an opportunity to provide the right resource to you that's going to meet your needs, because that's what we want to do. We want to build trusted relationships to help your patients get on the therapies that you've identified.
Can you review the acronym one more time?
Oh, sure. And I catered it and tailored it to who you all are. And for my team, it's interpreted a little different, but impact is influence everything that you potentially can to the positive. M is for measurable success. So we're looking to understand trends and outcomes, but ultimately helping your patients get on therapy. P is passion and patience. A is accountability. Do what you say you're going to do what your role is supposed to do what the account, each individual account has asked of you, because that is going to vary. You may have a wide range of what you can do, but they don't need all of that. Just do what they need you to do. And then C, compliant collaboration. And then T is for trust. And if I could, I would put T at the top, but that's not how impact starts. I think that is very, very critical. When you lose trust, you really lose the opportunity to appropriately advocate for patients, and that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Having that level of trust sounds like it's on both sides, again, the client or the provider level, as well as the FRM. And when I asked this question to Heather prior to today, of who is your ideal client? Who is your ideal person to speak to on that other end? Who are you the most excited to speak to, because you know that it's going to be a collaborative effort in that patient access goal? And this was the answer she gave me. You know, any HCP and their team who is highly motivated for both their patients, and they're actively participating, again, utilizing those resources, constantly having that conversation with FRMs, those are the ideal clients. Those are the ideal again, providers in the conversation with FRMs, because the FRMs, that's their goal, right? To actively be participants in that process as a resource.
May I just add, so a field reimbursement manager shows up a little different than the case manager in the hub. And I want to say that because work with your field reimbursement manager to cater sometimes what can be overwhelming communication coming from the hub, back-to-back calls, high volume of faxes, kind of what can seem sometimes like an insensitivity towards the workload that you're managing. What my team and I are able to do is we can set up weekly calls to review cases based on a preferred time of the office staff member. An office staff member, know that I'm also including ID and SPs. We do a lot of standing calls with ID and SPs. I want to bring this up because highly motivated doesn't mean always accessible anytime we want to reach out to you. We want to design a process that is sensitive to your time constraints, but we do just want to help your patients get on the therapies that you're writing, and we're willing to be as flexible and as nimble as possible. But very protracted communication is really not ideal. So a 2-week call, not really ideal. But one once-a-week call that's 15 minutes or 30 minutes based on the volume of cases that you have, where we can just summarize how the case is moving along, super helpful. If you have secure means in which you can communicate electronically, so an encrypted email service, and you prefer that, we can communicate electronically. I really want to stress for both parties involved that you do need to make sure that it is some sort of a encrypted email or HIPAA compliant electronic communication platform that you would be sharing information across. That's really important. But our goal is just to help every HCP and their staff members that's motivated, and you have identified appropriate patients.
Thank you, Heather. I feel like we got a lot of nuggets for those interactions and engaging with conversations with FRMs. I do want to open the floor to questions. Before we open the floor, I do want to mention as well that this session has been approved for a PACS CE. If you are PACS certified, today's session can apply to your PACS recertification. You can just scan this QR code. It's also in the Swap Card app if you need the link after the session. But I'll go ahead and open the floor. Are there any questions for Heather about the FRM role or how to interact with them? I see one right here.
This isn't more so about the interactions, but I am curious. I know that you mentioned copay accumulators, copay maximizers. So a lot of the copay applications, free drug applications that I see have an explicit term and condition that exclude those now for a reason to use the free drug or copay assistance. So what is the position as from a manufacturer's perspective about what these patients can do in these situations?
Sure. So one way in which our organization has helped circumvent that, and it does not work for everyone, right? But we have a direct reimbursement, so you don't have to use the copay. If you can pay your out-of-pocket cost, we will send you a check. And so usually we refund the patient or the caregiver. In our instance, it's a lot of caregivers because we have a pediatric indication for our therapy. That's why I keep saying caregiver. But if it's an adult patient, and they have the means to pay out of pocket, we have a direct reimbursement process for them. It does not work for everybody, and so then you still have a gap for patients who have not hit their deductible, and then they cannot use the copay card towards their deductible. I would say where we do have instances of maximizers, those are more friendly than a copay accumulator, and internally we've heard that maximizers will potentially supplant accumulators over time, which is a positive. And for those of you who don't know what the difference between an accumulator and a maximizer, if you have a $6,000 copay support available from a manufacturer, they would allot $500, so you're not using that total amount all up front. And if in the absence of an accumulator, if you had a deductible, your copay card, that $6,000, say you had a $2,000 deductible and then a copay, you present your copay card, that would cover the deductible that you had not paid yet and your copay. When you have a copay accumulator, it prevents the copay card from being applied towards the out-of-pocket deductible that the patient is responsible for. And for patients who have high deductible plans, that is very, very cost prohibitive and usually delays the onset of therapy, especially at the start of the year. So we have a lot of patients who get approved, then they don't actually start therapy maybe until June or July once they have hit their family deductible. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't really answer your question about how it's as much of it's a problem for payers it is for us as manufacturers, for caregivers and patients. It's problematic for us. We were optimistic about the legislation that had come out, but we've seen very little enforcement of that in a lot of different states. Yes, ma'am?
I was just going to add to that. I know that with most of the manufacturers I've worked with, I get a letter stating that the patient is not eligible for their copay program and submit that to the accumulator maximizing program, and then they would unenroll the patient from it and put them in their generalized insurance. Just because technically by them not being eligible, then they're not meeting the ACA requirements for that insurance. So a lot of the insurers will take that letter and remove the accumulator or maximizer, and then just have the patient in a long-term structure.
I believe I heard you say that from the stage, and that was very new and informative for me, so thank you for speaking up and sharing that with the audience. Did everyone hear her? If you did not, do you mind? I'm going to bring you this microphone because that's just really great information. Thank you.
Yeah, I had just said that many of the manufacturers that I've worked with, we reach out and advise that the patient has a copay accumulator or maximizer, and they send us a letter stating that the patient is therefore not eligible for their copay assistance or PAP program, and then we send that to whomever is handling their accumulator maximizer program, and they'll disenroll the patient from it and put it in a generalized insurance program so that the patient's insurance operates like normal. So if they had Optum with an outsourced third-party accumulator, the third-party accumulator will go away and they'll just go back to their regular Optum benefits.
Would you repeat your question?
I think just the logistics around what you're asking is that most of these programs are implemented and constructed through the employer. So are you asking the patient to go back to their employer, or what exactly takes place there?
No, so it's a third party that's handling it. It's not the employer that's handling it. Sorry. It's a third party that's handling it, a third party like external that implements these for specific drugs or specific formulary sections of the drugs. And that person, they'll be enrolled in like, I think it's like one of them is Save RX, and they'll enroll you in that. And so then you contact them, give them the letter from the manufacturer showing that the patient is not eligible for that, which means that the plan is now out of compliance with the ACA. And so then they will take the patient out of that and put them into just a regular insurance like they are for all of their other drugs. Most of these copay accumulators and maximizers don't affect every single drug on the formulary. They're only specific ones that they're targeting. So if you give them a letter stating that that specific drug cannot be used this way, they'll roll it back into a normal plan structure.
I don't mean to start like a debate, but then the problem still lies that there has to be their deductible and their co-insurance.
But now that they're not in that, they'll get the copay card. So they won't be in that plan anymore.
And I want to, this is such a great conversation, and these can be hard conversations for FRMs to solve. I just want to be very transparent with that. If you make a submission into the hub, sometimes this is where calling into the hub and asking to speak to the payer team that may have done the benefits investigation that your FRM reviewed with you, they may be able to better partner with you, because FRMs cannot usually reach out to payers. And what you're describing is communicating with the payer, and then the other layer of that is sometimes the office won't do that work. They're actually going to require the patient to do that work, which complicates it even more. And the communication is poor, and there's a lot of misunderstanding that the staff, you're in the dark, you really don't understand. So bring these scenarios up to the FRMs, because what we do is we go back, we talk with our leaders, and we say, there is an unmet need in understanding what to do when this occurs. And so then we design a training, we get with our hubs, we align and seek to understand what has happened, train the FRMs, so then we can come back out and inform you. But if we don't know that this is happening, and you bring up a really good point, this is not always going to happen, because copay accumulators are usually a tool and a device that's used in certain classes of drugs. Again, I work for Ascendis. It is commonly used in growth hormone, sometimes some oncolytics, sometimes immunology products, and I'm not very aware of many other, but anything that an employer or a specific plan deems they want to control cost. And it's weird for us to say employer, because what happens with employers are they go to a Cigna. A Cigna has 6 different formulary options, and then they choose what formulary option they want based on how much they want to spend. So you could have 5 different Cigna patients that have 5 different experiences, and it will blow your mind. And this is the other weird nuance for field reimbursement. We don't always know what formulary they have. We can sometimes do a little research through BIN and PCN numbers that are on the cards, and then uncover, oh, this BIN and PCN is associated with formulary 1, which is not premium. So with your premium plans, you may not have the copay accumulators, the maximizers with generous employers, and don't assume your rich employer that makes billions of dollars that you see annually is giving their employees the best formulary. I've seen some real interesting formulary choices for some employers that I would not expect it to be, and seen some very generous from small companies. So don't make any presumptions or assumptions that this goes with this. Any other questions? Well, thank you guys. I think I just would say these questions are hard, and the way I try to communicate here is just trustworthy and saying I don't know, because there's so much variance. And so having that information, who's the payer, is usually going to help the FRM tap into resources. And sometimes an FRM may not have experience with a specific payer, but it's phone a friend. Their team member does. And I have 2 team members here, Jodelle and Tanisha. This is their lived lives. Tanisha may have information that could empower Jodelle and vice versa. So if you're interacting with Jodelle, don't be mad Jodelle doesn't have the answer. She'll phone a friend on the team, and it might be Tanisha, and she'll get the details.